Welcome to this lecture on the principles of ecology. Today, we are going to explore a fascinating concept known as ecological guilds. If you have ever wondered how scientists make sense of the overwhelming complexity of a rainforest or a coral reef, you are in the right place. We will discover how nature organizes different species, not by their biological family trees, but by the jobs they do and the resources they rely on. Let us dive in and see how this functional perspective changes the way we understand ecosystems. To understand our topic, let us start with a simple analogy. Imagine you are walking through a bustling city and you decide to group people by their professions. You might group all the bakers together. Notice that these bakers might be of different ages, backgrounds, or even speak different languages, but they all use the same basic resources, like flour and ovens, to make a living. In the natural world, ecologists do the exact same thing to make sense of complex ecosystems. We group different animals or plants together based on their profession or how they make a living, regardless of their biological family tree. Now that we have our analogy, let us look at the formal scientific definition. An ecological guild is defined as a group of species that exploit the same class of environmental resources in a similar way. This specific term was first introduced to the scientific community by the ecologist Richard Root in 1967. He coined the term while he was studying a specific group of foliage-gleaning birds. The key takeaway here is that it is not just about eating the same food, but extracting it from the environment using comparable methods and facing similar ecological pressures. This brings us to the most crucial part of the guild definition, which is taxonomically independence. The species in a guild do not need to be taxonomically related to one another at all. For example, consider a nectar-feeding guild in a tropical environment. This guild might include hummingbirds, butterflies, and certain species of bats. Biologically, these are completely different types of animals: birds, insects, and mammals. However, because they all rely on flower nectar for energy and extract it in comparable ways, they belong to the exact same guild and often face similar ecological challenges. You might be wondering why ecologists bother grouping species this way. Understanding ecological guilds is incredibly important because it helps scientists simplify the overwhelming complexity of nature. Instead of trying to study hundreds of individual species in a dense rainforest, an ecologist can group them into a few functional guilds. This makes the entire ecosystem much easier to analyze and model. Furthermore, studying guilds helps us understand the intense competition that happens in nature. Because species in the same guild are fighting for the exact same limited resources, their interactions shape the survival and balance of the entire community. Building on that idea of competition, guild dynamics have massive real-world implications. If a disease wipes out one species in a guild, another species in that exact same guild might experience a sudden population boom because its main competitor is gone. This interconnectedness is vital for conservation efforts. When we protect a specific habitat, we are not just saving individual animals. We are ensuring that all the diverse members of a crucial guild can survive and keep the ecosystem balanced. We are protecting the jobs that need to be done to keep nature functioning properly. To truly understand how species within a guild interact, we need to measure how much they share or compete for resources. Ecologists use a mathematical tool called the proportional overlap index, often based on Schoner's index. The formula is O equals 1 minus 1/2 times the sum of the absolute differences between Pi and Qi. Conceptually, this calculates the exact percentage of resource sharing. The symbol O represents the total overlap, ranging from 0, meaning no sharing, to 1, meaning complete sharing. The variables pi and qi represent the proportion of a specific resource used by the first and second species, respectively. As O increases toward 1, the species compete more fiercely. Before we apply our new formula, let us set up a concrete example. Imagine we are studying a seed-eating guild in a desert, consisting of a mouse and a small bird. The environment provides two types of resources, small seeds and large seeds. Through observation, we find that the mouse gets 70% of its diet from small seeds and 30% from large seeds. Meanwhile, the bird gets 40% of its diet from small seeds and 60% from large seeds. We need to calculate their resource overlap to see how strongly they compete within this specific guild. Now, let us calculate the overlap using our formula. First, we look at the small seeds. We take the mouse's proportion of 0.70 and subtract the bird's proportion of 0.40. The absolute difference is 0.30. Next, we do the exact same for the large seeds, subtracting 0.60 from 0.30. The absolute value removes the negative sign, giving us 0.30 again. We add these differences together to get 0.60. Finally, we multiply by 1/2 and subtract from 1. Our final answer is 0.70. This physically means the mouse and bird share 70% of their resources, indicating strong competition. Let us look at a slightly more complex scenario to solidify our understanding. We are now studying a nectar-feeding guild in a tropical rainforest, focusing on a hummingbird and a butterfly. This time, they feed on 3 types of flowers: red, blue, and yellow. The hummingbird's diet consists of 50% red, 30% blue, and 20% yellow flowers. The butterfly's diet is 10% red, 80% blue, and 10% yellow. We want to determine their resource overlap across these 3 distinct categories to understand their competitive dynamics. We will apply the exact same proportional overlap index, but sum across 3 categories. For red flowers, the absolute difference between 50% and 10% is 0.40. For blue flowers, the difference is 0.50. For yellow flowers, it is 0.10. Adding these 3 values together gives us a total sum of differences equal to 1.00. We plug this into the final part of the equation, multiplying by 1/2 to get 0.50 and subtracting from 1. The final overlap index is 0.50. This indicates moderate competition, likely because the butterfly heavily prefers blue flowers while the hummingbird prefers red. Now that we have calculated overlap mathematically, let us visualize what this actually looks like in nature. On your screen is a graph showing resource utilization. The horizontal axis represents a resource gradient, such as seed size, from small to large. The vertical axis shows how frequently a species uses that resource. Each colored bell curve represents a different species within the guild. Notice the areas where the curves intersect. These shaded regions represent the niche overlap we just calculated. The larger the overlapping area between 2 curves, the higher the competition between those species for that specific resource size. To summarize our journey today, an ecological guild is a fascinating way to group species based on their profession, regardless of their evolutionary history. By grouping organisms this way, ecologists can easily map out functional roles within an ecosystem. We also learned how to use the proportional overlap index to mathematically predict how fiercely species will compete for shared resources. Whether it is birds and mice eating seeds or bats and bees drinking nectar, guilds show us that nature is organized by the jobs that need to be done. Mastering this functional perspective is your first major step toward understanding the interconnected web of life.